welcome. We're going to start the program in about 5 minutes, so if there's anything you need to do. Welcome. I want to thank everybody for traveling, those of you that are here in Juneau and people that have come far and wide and everyone that's participating virtually. It's great to have everyone come together. This is a different kind of service. It's really a celebration of Jason, and it's an opportunity for us to have some time and space with our dear friend Jason through stories, memories, photos, video, music. In the spirit of Dr. Ohler, it's truly a multimedia event. So thank you so much for being here. We're on the University of Alaska Southeast campus, and we need to acknowledge the people who have come before us. The UAS campus resides on the unceded territory of the Akwaan on Tlingit Ani, also known as Juneau and Douglas, Alaska. We acknowledge that Tlingit peoples have been stewards of the land on which we work and reside since time immemorial, and we are grateful for that stewardship and incredible care. We also recognize that our campus is adjacent to the ancestral home of the Taku Kwan and houses neighboring Haida and Tsimshian peoples. We commit to serving their peoples with equity and care. We recognize the series of unjust actions that attempted to remove the Akwaan from their land, which includes forced relocations and the burning of villages. We aspire to work toward healing and liberation, recognizing our paths are intertwined in the complex histories of colonization in Alaska. We recognize that we arrived here by listening to the people's, elders' lessons from the past, and these stories carry us as we weave a healthier world for future generations. So thank you for being here. I also want to acknowledge real quick that this is a really different kind of thing that's happening. And so some people have been getting together for a while. Mary Wegner, Terry Ohler, Christy Ford, Brett Dillingham, Clay Good, Claire Fordyce, and Mike and Rick Ohler have also hopped in on the Zoom calls to help us out. So it's great to finally come together and get started. Terry gave me permission to tell one welcome story about Jason, and so the wheels have been turning, over the last 30 years. But there was one story that I thought was really appropriate. So my son Paul in 1997 was 6 years old, and like a lot of kids, he didn't think his parents were particularly cool, but he worshipped Jason. And Jason was always like pulling his leg and telling him stories. And so Paul was our webmaster for our Klondike relay team. So he would go with us and take pictures and put together a web page using PageMill. It was an old HTML editor that probably isn't around anymore, but he'd put together a basic website. And Jason taught him how to do that. So we were up at Budzo Manor, and Paul was sitting with Jason on his laptop, and Jason says, "So you're going up to Canada?" And this was his first time going on the Klondike, and Paul says, "Yeah, I'm really excited." And Jason says, "Well, do you know how to speak Canadian?" And Paul was like, "I didn't know they had a different language in Canada." Said, "Oh yeah." Jason says, "I did my undergraduate work in Canada, and I'm actually fluent in Canadian." And so he says, I'll teach you a few words so when you're up there you can speak to the Canadians. So Jason says, in English in America, our word for the morning meal is breakfast. In Canada, what the Canadians say is steak and eggs, eh? And Paul looks over at me. He's like, he's doing it again. You know what I mean? This is our guy. So anyway, Paul was getting ready to come with us up to the Klondike, and came back and he showed the web page to Jason for PageMill. And this is the part that's really kind of amazing. So he shows it to Jason. Jason was teaching the elementary Master of Arts in Teaching class about technology, education technology, and he wanted to teach him how to do a web page. So he says to Paul, he says, "Why don't you come in and teach them how to use PageMill?" And Paul's like, "Teach the teachers?" And Jason's like, "Yeah, you'll be perfect. They'd much rather listen to you than me," right? So Paul is all excited, and he says, "Well, if I'm going to teach your class for you, does that mean I get your salary?" And that's my son right there. So and Jason says, "Well, we work at University of Alaska Southeast, and salary isn't really measured in money. It's measured in something called quality of life." And Paul rolls his eyes. He's like, "Quality of life, oh brother." So, but anyway, they came to an agreement, and so Paul showed up there used to be a computer lab in the Sobolev room, and so Paul shows up. He's got a dress shirt, a tie, he's all ready. He's got a handout, and he was in first grade over at Amy Jo Miner's class, and the first line on the handout is, "Be a good neighbor." And it was phonetic, like first grade spelling, so neighbor was like N-A-B-R, right? So he's got his handout, he passes out the handout, he had floppy disks with some pictures, right? So they're working on their web pages, and after a while it's getting really loud, and the elementary teachers are laughing and they're having fun, they're building their web pages. So Paul comes back to Jason and he says, "They're really loud and they're not listening to me." And Jason says, "You're the teacher, deal." So Paul goes back and he goes to the front of the room and he does his Amy Jo Miners, and he goes like this. And he just stands until everybody's quiet. They got their attention, and everybody finished their web pages, and it was a great thing. But I love that story because I think in some ways Jason was like from a different planet, or maybe a different, like from the future or something. I mean, he saw people and just saw what they could do. You know what I mean? There were no boundaries in any kind of roles. He was always telling people, you should do this. You know what I mean? And for a 6-year-old to teach a graduate class at the university, in Jason's world, that makes perfect sense. You know what I mean? He just transcended a lot of these roles and things that we experience in the human world. So anyway, it's a really emotional thing to be here. He was just a dear, dear friend, and so anyway, thank you for being here, and we'll start with Dr. Amanda Underwood, and she is Jason's daughter by heart, and they were very special people in each other's lives, and she will read "Dear Whoever is Listening."
I'm sorry. My name is Amanda, and as has been mentioned, for those who don't know, Jason and I are connected by a marriage. He served in the role of stepdad for many years during my adolescence. He'd be really mad at me for using that term, which we'll talk more about. And I've been asked to read a piece composed by Jason. Sorry. So, the words of a dead man, written in anticipation of his own death. As you can see, despite reading them over several times in anticipation of this, they are still hard to read. And if you're having those thoughts that frequently surround a death, things like how unjust or why so soon, I'd invite you to take the next few minutes to acknowledge those thoughts and feelings. And then, in the words of my most favorite yoga instructor, Megan, you gotta let that shit go. Because Jason very clearly never intended for this to be a somber event. He was expecting a party. Now, lost the words, so I'm gonna find them again. So this is a reading from Jason. Dear whoever is listening, please know that regardless of what I have experienced, none of it has risen to the level of true suffering. As I battled my way through the suffocations of IPF, the pain of transplants and biopsies, the nausea of infusions and IV drips, and the loss of half of my mouth, the failure of my kidneys, the debilitating cures that disabled and humbled me, only to have my lungs fail again due to rejection. None of this has come close to what children living in war zones experience on a daily basis as they dodge bullets just to find breakfast. They suffer, I have not. As a footnote, as of December 25th, 2021, there are 40 armed conflicts raging on our planet. You'd think by now we would have at least tried giving peace a chance. In fact, I would like to thank my illness for all it has taught me. Patience, humility, a certain graciousness in movement that has hitherto eluded me, immense gratitude, resourcefulness, and the vulnerability to draw upon the strength of others, particularly Terry, my most amazing wife. My particular maladies have also taught me a crap ton about the human body and provided a fascinating journey into the science of physiology and the intricacies of healthcare systems. As one who loves to learn, the education has been deep, wide, and always fascinating. The reality is that my sunset years were spent in relative comfort, with excellent care, surrounded by friends and family. I prayed, cultivated a positive attitude, did what my doctors and wife told me to do, and the chips fell as they did. As I progressed in my illness, I did so knowing that I was allowed to live as long as I did, as well as I did, because I was privileged, due to the circumstances of my birth in terms of both time and place. A visceral counterpoint that played in my mind throughout my illness was the drumbeat of the billions of people on the planet who didn't have access to healthcare like mine. Some of them live here at home, within our borders. There's something terribly wrong with that. If we value life as we so claim, then why isn't that mission number one? Why don't the religious of the world lead the charge for fair healthcare? It was an honor to face death head on. With introspection, a renewed sense of connection to the universe, and what was truly important, an immense gratitude for the many blessings I have received. I lived the life, loved my work, was blessed with a wonderful, loving wife, and wonderful family and friends. No complaints, no regrets. From my perspective, wherever I am, I've returned home after a journey that seemed so incredibly long, yet passed in a wink. With nothing but love in my heart, Jason. There are parts of Jason's life and legacy that I carry with me in my days, my experiences, and that I try to remind myself of when I think about my goals for the future. So I'd like to spend some time talking about lessons. I think it's the lessons that we can learn from a life well lived that allow space for celebration in a time that can otherwise be overshadowed by sadness and despair. So, lesson number one, have fun. I can't say for sure, but I think as you can tell from that first story that was told, I get the impression that for Jason, this was the ultimate purpose in life, was to have fun, to not take oneself so seriously, and to be able to find humor in almost any situation, even death. He sent me a text at some point about some mishap with Einstein's brain, and referencing his own, he told me, "When I die, I want mine stored in a wine vat." So, Terry, I hope you have that under control. I mentioned that Jason was a stepdad, but that word to him was like a pejorative. It came with so much baggage and so much negative connotation. It was devoid of any of the type of humor he wanted to be involved in. So he rejected that label. He insisted that he was not, in fact, my stepdad. He was my stepdude. This was middle school, and I don't know if you've blacked out middle school like I did, but if you did, you may not be like feeling that visceral sense of profound embarrassment that something like this could cause. It wasn't just a term that we used in the comfort of our own home, it was the preferred label. So imagine being in middle school and introducing your step dude. It was mortifying. But I am a parent now, and I get it. If you can't laugh, then you cry or you lose your mind. So Jason, in his infinite wisdom, chose to laugh, and I'd bemoan how embarrassing it was, and he'd remind me, you can only embarrass yourself. This didn't help much when I was in middle school, but it has certainly helped immensely in my adult life, where I am blessed with a lovely husband who embraces dad jokes. Lesson number 2, get fit. This might seem goofy, and in fact, it's in part meant to be humorous if you reference lesson number 1. But I'm not sure how many of you ever got to witness Jason in any of his fitness routines. All right, some people did. So for those who never had the experience or the pleasure of experiencing it, I'm gonna take you on a little journey. Jason, at some point in his life, became serious about fitness as part of his longevity and wellness. The phase of his wellness journey that I remember most vividly is what I refer to as Stairmaster Jason. Yeah, picture this. Several times per week in his exercise attire, which included sometimes shorts that were very short, he would traipse down to the basement, put on his headphones, and he would Stairmaster for at least 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Maybe it was longer, I don't know, but it was definitely at least 20 minutes. Yeah. Have you ever been on a Stairmaster? I try to make myself take the stairs at work 90% of the time, and I will tell you, when I go from floor 2 to floor 5, I get to the top and I sound unwell, okay? But there was Jason. He'd huff and he'd puff and he was covered in sweat, and when he was done, he was so proud every single time. It was like he had just, conquered this monumental thing, okay? And while I laugh every time when I think about Stairmaster Jason, I think the non-humorous part of this is that Jason knew that routine physical activity was within his locus of control regarding his health and longevity. So he was committed. I say this because in general, I don't think enough people recognize the profound impact that fitness can have, and research has consistently shown that moderate, strenuous physical activity is the best medicine for almost anything that ails you. And so I hope that everyone can use the image of Stairmaster Jason, short, sweaty shorts and all, as a motivator to strive for more. Lesson number 3, final lesson, be prepared. Jason was a man who liked to be prepared. He prepared in many ways, but for this last point, I want to focus on how he prepared for his death. He had, depending on your perspective, either the luxury or the curse of knowing that death was coming for him. And we don't all get that. I mean, we know it's coming sooner or later, but not necessarily in the time frame that Jason could anticipate, and not in a way that we generally all acknowledge. But honestly, even before Jason got his diagnosis and started his long trudge through the medical complex, he had planned for what he would want. He clearly communicated about interventions he would or wouldn't want in case of accident, illness, or injury. He was very clear that a party or celebration would be the only acceptable funeral for him. And these things are hard to think about and acknowledge. But for the sake of your family, your friends, your loved ones, and anyone who might be in a position to have to make decisions on your behalf in the case of unforeseen circumstances, I urge you to do just that. Even if you're well, even if, and especially if right now you're thinking, oh, that won't be me. Consider who you would want to designate as your healthcare power of attorney. Speak with anyone who might be put in the situation of having to make decisions for you about what your wishes might be. How many lines and tubes would you be willing to accept? What do you consider to be a meaningful existence, and what would you be willing to undergo and endure to achieve that? Consider organ donation. Sign up to be a donor. and make sure that your family and friends understand in no uncertain terms about your intent. Draft a will, because the pain and suffering from a death comes from so many things, but especially when loved ones are left to ask, what if? What if we had or hadn't done that? What if we had or hadn't put them through that? Is this what they would have wanted, and would things have been different? Jason and his preparation gave us the gift of not having to be burdened with this emotional load, and I challenge you all to do the same for those who love you. In his own words, Jason describes his life as privileged, no complaints, no regrets. So here's to celebrating a life of such abundance, and may we all strive to achieve even a fraction of that. Thanks.
Thanks, Amanda. That was beautiful, except for the shorts part, but the rest was really nice. Like to welcome Senator Keel. Jesse Keel is the senator for District Q, representing Juneau, Haines, Skagway, Gustavus, and Klukwan. Born and raised in Anchorage, Jesse graduated from Whitman College at the end of the 90s after an internship with U.S. Senator Ted Stevens. But it was his internship for Governor Tony Knowles that brought him to Juneau. That's when he knew he'd found home. Jesse worked as a legislative staffer for Southeast state senators for 18 years, and he served more than 7 years on the Juneau Assembly, including as chair of the Finance Committee. Jesse and his wife are raising 2 daughters in the capital city.
Maybe the more important part that was left out of the introduction is that 20 years ago, my wife and I bought a house about 2.5 blocks from Budzow Manor. Enough said. It's a great privilege to get to honor someone like Jason. And unfortunately, I have to confess that I lost the race. Few people know this. We as legislators don't get a lot of genuine special privileges, but one thing we get to do is to honor fine Alaskans, exemplary Alaskans, with legislative citations like the one for Jason Ohler. But this isn't my citation. Sarah Hannon beat me to the punch. Now she's traveling, unfortunately, and sends her regrets, as does Representative Story. The Representative Story and I are the co-sponsors of this citation. But I think it's telling that there was a race to honor Jason. I won't take the time to read every word of this citation. I'm also going to put it back in the plastic sleeve so I don't get spots on it, as folks are rightly emotional. But I will just read the closing paragraph, because I think it sums up a little bit of why the legislature saw fit on a statewide basis to honor him. The members of the 32nd Alaska State Legislature join the family and friends of Dr. Jason Ohler in commemorating a life devoted to teaching people around the world how to bring kindness, ethics, and expertise to the ever-evolving world of technology. There's a lot more here, and there was a lot more to Jason. But it is fitting and it is right that we honor him for his contributions in the public square and to our polity, to nothing less than our polity in Alaska, for his work at the university, to his work in the civic arena. Thank you, Jason, and thanks everyone for being here to honor him.
Thank you, Senator Keel. Next, we're going to turn to some music. So Dr. Craig Harris is a composer, theater artist, writer, and producer based in Minneapolis. Jason and Craig met and quickly became friends in Toronto in September 1971. They spent many hours and then many years together exploring art, life, and meaning, often wearing pathways into Craig's living room rug as they paced the floor in heated conversation with great intensity and synchronicity. Craig dedicates this music to Jason, ever grateful for his friendship. He will play an original piano piece titled Still. Thank you, Craig. Hopefully you're out there joining us today. That's actually a nice introduction for our next speaker, Clay Good. When Clay met Jason in 1985, he was a skinny first-year science teacher, a single dad, and a recovering evangelical Christian. 1990 was pivotal as he bought Budzo Manor with Jason, Brett, and Mark, and then picked up a beautiful Australian hitchhiker 26 miles north of Haynes, who's with us today. Understandably, this eclectic melange of intellect, art, and adventure that is Budzo Manor set the stage for a generation of love, music, and mirth for all who have dwelt within her walls. Notably, Jason's home was perched on top of it all.
Thank you, Scott. Good to see everybody. Good to be here. Good to be a Budzo. Speaking of Budzo Manor, as was sort of hinted in the introduction, I am known as the Deacon, and that's a longer story for a later time, but I was inspired by Jason's considerations about religion and wanted to read his essay, Waiting for Religion 2.0. My parents raised me as best they could to be a global citizen. They supported civil rights long before it was cool to do so in the suburbs, and reinforced a vision of America, the multicultural, through social activism and copious amounts of dinner table conversation. But there were powerful forces arrayed against my developing pluralistic outlook as a young child. To begin with, the very average suburb in which I lived was as multicultural as the cast of Leave It to Beaver. For those of you who are not members of AARP, Leave It to Beaver was a popular TV show in the 50s and 60s that supposedly portrayed a typical American family that consisted of a dad who went to the office, a stay-at-home mom with perfectly coiffed hair, who did housework in an evening gown, and kids who always had a clean, safe park to play in. Everyone was white and, for the most part, employed, friendly, and apparently normal. To reinforce this non-pluralistic worldview, my elementary school used textbooks that talked about the conquests of America by European settlers as though it was a great deal for everyone. African Americans and Native Americans were given very little mention and certainly no voice at all. But of all the forces at work against the development of a global perspective, religion was the most powerful. Like most people, my religious options were limited to those determined by geography and family. While my family encouraged me to learn about diverse spiritual viewpoints, local church officials did not. To them, other religions were interesting in a National Geographic kind of way, but were viewed largely as contaminants to be avoided, a perspective that I've come to appreciate is very typical among the devoutly religious. Because we never talked about the bigger picture of global religion in church or in school, we also never talked about the fact that every religion portrays itself as the one and only true path to God, and therefore beyond question and worth defending at all costs. As a young child, this wasn't a problem because the newsreels I watched in school about other religions portrayed them as so bizarre that I felt lucky to live where I did. Hindus were portrayed as strange people without cars who let cows roam the streets at will. And Muslims apparently spent all day praying while listening to a kind of music that was so strange it felt threatening. It was all very exotic, strange, and fortunately, very far away. But that was before the internet. The jet engine and international cell phones made us all neighbors and added some humanistic detail to the picture we all had of one another. Now we are all reminded on a daily basis of whatever religion we belong to is just one of many, and that the idea of there being only one true path to God is obviously a flawed notion. This has produced the most important conundrum of our day, which, if not addressed, will certainly help fracture the world, if not destroy it. How do we begin teaching our children that there are many religious paths one can take, and that a primary purpose of each should be to respect all of them. This is the goal of Religion 2.0. Modest beginnings are not hard to find. As citizens and parents, we could call upon religious leaders to take a moment to acknowledge other religions during religious ceremonies. We could also begin teaching our children the difference between faith and knowledge, and that the inability to distinguish between the two can lead directly to unspeakable acts of inhumanity. The least we could do is stop using God as a scapegoat for the wars we wage on each other. While it's true that most wars are economic, rarely do soldiers charge into battle for the sake of money. Usually they do so for the sake of their queen, their country, or their God. Whatever we do, Religion 2.0 demands that we champion the idea of God as a divinity that subsumes, embraces, and connects all of religion's little gods. In practical terms, perhaps a starting point might be for religious leaders from across the theological spectrum to regularly appear in public dialogue. Photo sessions in which they do no more than share tea or play a quiet game of croquet could make the world a much safer place. If humankind were really lucky, religious leaders might officially begin Religion 2.0 by resolving on TV to amend their holy books to begin with these words: "The following is an opinion." My guess is that there are millions of people like me who are waiting for Religion 2.0 before considering joining a church of any denomination. Should Religion 2.0 ever come about, I will go shopping for a belief system that best fits my idealistic vision of what the world could be. In the meantime, there's the issue of what to believe until Religion 2.0 takes hold. Given that faith provides a respite from rational analysis, allow me to be faithful for a moment by saying that I continue to believe in the spiritual perspective, that underpinned the global outlook that I received from my parents, and that is, whatever deity is really in charge of Temple Earth is obviously at least as large as all of us, plays no favorites, and wishes no part of creation any harm.
Thank you, Deacon Budzo. Shopping for a belief system of what the world could be. It's really something to take with us today. That's beautiful. I'd like to introduce Dr. Mike Felix. He is a retired telecom and technology senior executive and the former president and CEO of Alascom, where he first met Jason in 2002. They quickly discovered their shared passion for guitars and for the possibilities at the intersection of technology and education. Dr. Ohler was the driving influence in Mike's pursuit of his doctorate at Fielding Graduate University and was Dr. Felix's chair professor and mentor through the media psychology program.
Thank you, Scott. Of all the introductions I've received, that certainly was the most recent. Give it a second. Give it a second. I have the privilege of reading some thank yous from Jason, and I want to do that, and then I would like to append those thank yous with a few thoughts of my own about Jason, and I promise not to be long. I wrote them down, so I'd stick to my 2 or 3 minutes. This is from Jason. I know when Oscar winners start to thank everyone in the world who made their success possible, it gets old fast. But I do have people I want to thank. Believe me, this is the short list. Everyone I have met has taught me something, and for that I am very grateful. I have had a wonderful life, done much, seen plenty, felt deeply. I have had wonderful friends, among them the Budzos, Clay, Claire, Brett and Christy, Mark and Trish, and the children of them all, my first circle with whom I shared so much and experienced the challenges, triumphs, and true love of friendship. And my friends in artistic collaboration, so full of heart and soul, who helped me find my own artistic vision, especially John Farringer, the mega artist, Craig Harris, whom we heard earlier, the composer extraordinaire, Brett Dillingham, the amazing storyteller and anthropologist, Clay Good, the consummate musician and eco-philosopher, Larry Addington, the amazing graphic artist and bookmaker, and Jamie Gregory, my endearing friend and inspiring bandmate. And all those with whom I have enjoyed musical friendships, especially Steve Nelson, Adrian Minnie, and Clay Good. It's hard to explain the language of music to others, isn't it? Thanks for being so fluent and sharing such interesting conversations with me. Thank you, too, to Frank Sullivan, who did so much to inspire my musicianship and my cooking. And thank you to Juneau, Alaska, for accepting me so readily and providing such a beautiful home during times of such personal searching. Thank you to the Alaska Native community, from whom I learned so much about what it means to be a human being, and to Dan and Amanda and their family, and Madeline, all of whom opened my heart in beautiful ways. I'd now like to offer a few of my own thoughts about Jason. One of Jason's passions, as we've already talked about this morning, was in creating stories and helping others create their stories. He had written books on how to create stories, and had even written stories to help people think about their place and potential in life. In fact, the last thing he was working on was a play. He was not only a student of the power of story and a teacher of story, he honored others' stories. Many of you here know that he gave himself freely to young people who were troubled, and to his students, me among them, helping them tell their stories and discover their worth through their stories. Malcolm Forbes said that the true measure of a man is how he treats someone who can do absolutely no good for him. Such was the measure of Jason, who treated each story with a dignity that demonstrated the value of each life he interacted with. He didn't do this to enlarge his own reputation, but to help people understand that they are known and they can be known. As the songwriter Matthew West says, if you wonder if you're just another nameless face in a crowd, well, now you're home. I want you to know you are known. This was Jason's life's work. His teaching and writing showed that he understood very well that people are shaped by stories and not the other way around. He also helped people, troubled youths and graduate students alike that he worked with, see the truth in what Joshua Marine said, challenges are what make life interesting. Overcoming them is what makes life meaningful. In fact, his own life was the very example of this writ large. My wife Bethany and I had the privilege of hosting Jason in our home many times, especially when we lived in Chicago. We lived here and lived in Anchorage for 9 years, and then I was in Chicago for 5 years. And he and Terry had hosted us a couple of times in Arizona, especially as we attempted to provide support and friendship to Jason as he and Terry dealt with his long issues over the last 7 or so years. And while we were in Chicago, our granddaughter Emma, who was often with us when her mom traveled for business, would always remark how kind Mr. Jason was. She was 3 or 4 at the time, and even then, she recognized Jason's heart of kindness toward others, especially kids. Jason and I shared a passion for family, music and guitars, and for food and wine. Every time he was over, we always managed to break out a bottle of one of my finest. He did that for me. And we shared a thirst for knowledge of what technology would afford us. And we shared deep conversations about family and about this life and about the next life. I will miss those times with him. He made me a more compassionate and understanding person. As it says in Proverbs 27, as iron sharpens iron, so do friends sharpen each other. As it is for many of you, Jason will forever be an inextricable part of my own story. I wouldn't be where I am today without his influence and his prodding and his encouragement. The great Chicago Cubs baseball player Ernie Banks said, "The measure of a man is in the lives he's touched." And in that sense, Jason was larger than life, as the lives he touched are too numerous to count. God rest your soul, Jason.
Thanks, Mike. Mentioned Ernie Banks. Jason was also a Cubs fan. Went to a couple games at Wrigley Field. I'd like to introduce Dr. Kathy Andreg. Kathy is a 1995 graduate of the Masters in Education Technology program that Jason envisioned and in which he taught. Kathy went on to earn a doctorate in education technology, and she led systemic initiatives focused on leveraging the power of learning with and through technology in school districts both in Washington and Alaska, as well as the state level in Alaska. Inspired by what she learned from working with Jason, Kathy infused humanity and respect in all of her work.
Aloha aku, aloha mai, aloha kalani ake a kalani ha, mai uka ke kai olu mali aloha aku, aloha mai, aloha Eia no, eia no, e hoi mai oe, I ka poli aloha o Hawaii. Kalani ake a kalani ha, aloha aku, aloha mai, aloha Eia no Kalani ake a kalani ha, aloha aku, aloha mai, aloha
Okay, we sort of did that backwards, so I'm just going with it. I'm here to do thank yous part 2 for Jason, but I just wanted to say, I live in Hawaii. I've been there for 7 years, and the reason why I did hula is because I can't usually talk at a wedding or a memorial service without getting very emotional. So that was my way to tell the story, and I learned from Jason how to produce a digital story, so I kind of felt like the meshing of the two was really appropriate. So here's Jason's thank yous part 2, and I just got to say, when I met Jason, I didn't need these to read it. Thank you, too. My fellow educational visionaries, particularly Mary Wagner, Scott Christian, and Susie Ohler, who always pushed the boundaries in the name of better, more soulful learning and always invited me to come with them. To my colleagues at UAS, Fielding, and Full Sail, who made life a truly amazing learning journey. My many colleagues in the worlds of educational technology and digital citizenship, who urged me toward a greater understanding of what it meant not only to teach, but also to learn and to serve. The thousands of students whom I have had the honor to serve and from whom I learned so much. I do hope I helped you tell your stories. To my, I didn't think that line was going to get me. To my many neighbors over the years who are too numerous to mention, who have borne my many illnesses with me, always looking for ways to help. Mike and Bethany, Felix, and family, whose unwavering generosity and kindness kept me going during darker days. To the amazingly capable and great transplant doctors and their team members, nurses, staff, and everyone else at Norton Thoracic Center and St. Joseph's Hospital. You are brilliant medical practitioners and excellent human beings, and I salute you. To the stranger I never knew for the donation of a set of healthy lungs. Your foresight and magnanimity enabled me to enjoy life for 7 extra years. Please know that I fought as hard as I did to stay alive because I didn't want to let you down. My kidney and dialysis team and Dr. Jurgis, who is the very definition of a great and humane doctor.
Thanks, Kathy. Anybody that worked with Jason in a classroom, that phrase, not only to teach, but to learn and to serve, was always close at hand. Next is Mark Whitman, who is a good friend and budzo of Jason's from Juneau.
Thank you. I'm here to share thank yous from Jason to all of you. Thank you to Jan, Terry's mom, who was incredibly generous and helpful as I battle IPF and throughout my lung transplant and afterwards. Bob and Diane, Terry's dad and stepmom, and their family, who welcomed me without reservation into the cozy extended family. Aunt Priscilla and all of my cousins and extended family in New Hampshire and beyond, who live amazing lives and extended me nothing but unconditional love. 2 excellent brothers of the highest caliber, Rick and Mike. I hear of the strife that besets so many families, and I think to myself, how is it we never experienced that? I guess we were too busy having fun loving each other. Thank you, and your families, for enriching my life. And of course, none of this would have been possible without 2 of the most extraordinary parents in the world, Richard and Susan. I hope the rumor that you get to meet up with your parents is true, because the last 7 years have been very tiring. and I would love to take a vacation with them, just like we did when I was a kid with Rick and me in the back of the station wagon as we motored our way to Jaffrey, New Hampshire, looking out for out-of-state license plates and enjoying life in such a visceral and ethereal way. They gave me the gift of unconditional love, expert guidance, and true support. They developed my intelligence and awareness of social inequalities starting at a young age. They weren't afraid to stand up to racists and bigots and disagree with them, and raised me to do the same. Thanks to them, I have become a human being who enjoys a life based on social mindedness, kindness, inquiry, fun, adventure, and a true sense of community. But all of the bounty I have experienced, at the top of the list are the years I have spent with Terry. Saint Terry, I have loved you so much, so completely. It was an honor to have the opportunity to do so, an honor of heart, mind, body, and soul. You are the very best that humanity has to offer. I'm sorry to embarrass you publicly, but hey, it's my memorial service. You know, what is really important, and you never waver, I used to tell Terry that my only fear in life is that I would die having never done anything truly beautiful. It took me a long time to realize that embracing what you had to offer was itself the greatest act of beauty I could ever hope to be part of. And for the last time, I apologize for everything that my many illnesses put you through. When I told you how sorry I was, you graciously told me not to worry about it. It wasn't my fault, but your support was saint-like. Thank you for being you and for bringing your wonderful family of children and grandchildren into my life, giving my life a richness that I never thought possible. I love you, and Tori and Jess, Bethany and Dom, Micah and Jesse, Eben, Shay, Declan, Sully, Blue, Hazel, Robert, and Jordan, now and forever. To Tori, Bethany, Micah, and Amanda, please know that if I could have special ordered children, they would have been exactly like you. I have truly enjoyed being a part of your life. I am proud of you as people who pursued your dreams and simply as human beings who know what is important. You have hearts and minds that would make any parent proud. To my grand boys, always aim to be gentlemen. To my grand boys and grand girls, never be mean. Always take the path of kindness, be bold, and have dreams. Do that, and you will lead lives that you will love and that you will be able to look back on without regret. To all my grandchildren, thank you for the mess, for the Legos wedged between couch pillows, the chalked up sidewalks, the cardboard box obstacle courses that filled my living room. You always reminded me that life is meant to be celebrated as a performance art project. My advice to you, be honest but kind, a difficult balancing act, but one that will define your character in ways that will ripple through time and change the world in small, powerful ways. To those who would judge you or your family, and do so out of a sense of self-righteous religious indignation, feel compassion for their misguided anger and their misunderstanding of God's love. Know that their judgment is a result of hurt they never processed. Find a place to shelter your heart until you are your own and the storms of their rage have passed. Above all, don't become like them. Be better. Think bigger. Feel more deeply. And don't judge like they judge. I'll be sharing a song, and it'll take me a moment to set up, and Terry said I could share with you what I felt. What I need to let you know is that I have been in communication with Jason. He didn't send me a text. He didn't send me an email. He's using a different system now. It's called intuition. And as Clay reminded me, it's wireless. Yes. And he had me learn a song, which I didn't know on the dulcimer, which I'll play. And I was like, why did he want me to learn this? And then I went over the lyrics, and part of them are, let your troubles melt like lemon drops. So he inspired me to make sure I brought lemon drops today. And if anybody's troubled afterwards, I have them for you to melt your troubles. He said, especially look for children. So if there's any parents who see a strange man who is handing candy to their children, don't blame it on me. It's Jason. So take me a minute to sit up here.
Thanks, Mark. Just a reminder, this is Jason's memorial service, and keeping true to form, Jason communicated a lot of ways, including the wireless that we're all familiar with, but through music, through art, through media. And so it is important that we have some time together here without words. So thanks a lot, Mark. The next speaker really doesn't need an introduction, but that's my role here today. So Brett Dillingham is a storyteller, author, educator, and anthropologist. He met Jason in 1985 in a class Jason was teaching. They became lifelong friends and colleagues, worked together in Europe and Asia, taught storytelling to children and teachers. They both knew how fortunate they were to have such wonderful friends and family in their lives. They laughed until they cried.
A dog sighed. Jason had a dog side when you got to know him. Outside of his hallowed professional halls. In those hallowed professional halls, his great brain's thought processes led to work in cities, states, countries, to giant stages, huge screens of Jason behind Jason as he accurately prognosticated laying out our future. He was eagerly sought by master educators, technologists, ministers of education the world over. He told stories, modern fairy tales. His synapses and dendrites saw the future. 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 Foresaw sapiens creating online communities, retail leviathans sucking our money through the ether in bits and bytes. He described in detail the immense genie clouding out of its bandwidth bottle while it was yet smoke, stoppered in ancient glass. He saw what we were losing as a result of this burgeoning technology, the paucous emotional spectrum of text and emojis, paled in comparison to the myriad messages of body language, of facial tics, winking, glinting eyes, the rich, varied tones of voice swirling in our ears, birds singing, sunshine. Jason never forgot. Nor did he forget pheromones in the air. In Dublin, he sniffed out a particular set of pheromones, Terry's. He followed his nose, his eyes, his brain, his heart. They rode in a horse-drawn buggy, the charms of that lovely city, weak tea to hers. From Dublin, he came back, told his pack, "I've a mate, mates." From then on, J-Dog happily howled at the moon, in love, content. Yes, Jason had a dog side, and Jason was a happy dog.
I don't think anybody can follow that. Thanks, Brad. Needed a little levity, so that was well done. I'd like to introduce John Farringer. He is an artist, musician, craftsman, writer, and storyteller. Jason and John grew up 3 blocks away from each other in East Aurora, New York, a small mythical village just outside of Buffalo. They cleared a path through grade school together, then went on to develop their individualized brands in high school. Jason, being the elder of the two, graduated 1 year earlier than John, and then headed off to college and eventually ended up in the Yukon. The two of them rendezvoused later in Juneau in 1980. John eagerly adopted Juneau as his new home and set up a working studio that served to establish a successful fine art career for him over the next 30 years. John now lives in Reykjavik, Iceland, with his wife Helga, where he continues to experiment, explore, and of course, make all kinds of art.
Hi, and greetings from Reykjavik, Iceland. I so wish I could share this day with you in person, but considerations beyond my control leaves me anchored down here to this little island of volcanic rock floating out in the middle of the North Atlantic right now. But you know, my heart is right there with you, joined in this celebration of an extraordinary life, a life that was well done. What you're about to hear is a reading of a letter I wrote to Jason a year and a half ago on his 58th birthday. What began as a confession of gratitude for the years of kindness and support that Jason offers in friendship turned out to be a tale of a relationship between these two guys that met in grade school and became lifelong pals for nearly 6 decades. Terry asked me to read the letter to you today, and I agreed. My hope is that as you listen to an account of how just one person's reoccurring acts of kindness and grace can make the difference for someone, such as myself, maybe a spark of inspiration will hearten a few of you, and maybe all of you, to reach out to the people in your own life, the people that made an explicit effort on your behalf, an effort that changed your flight path for the better. Let them know that the kindness they shared mattered to you deeply, as Jason's did for me. With that, I send you my blessings today from Iceland in memory of Jason, my pal. It was good to talk to you yesterday, Jason, and I enjoyed our conversation. I'm so pleased to hear that my help has been a useful resource throughout this overly challenging period in regards to your health. As I mentioned on the phone, I have also benefited greatly from our friendship. From the beginning of our alliance that began 55 years ago in elementary school, your endorsement and support, selflessly gifted to an awkward and often shy preacher's kid, someone that you embraced as an equal, has been a blessing in my life. You may forget some of the early details, so let me offer some reminders. You were the one who actually gave me my first taste of disruptive technology at 10 years old, the day you invited me over to your house on Oakwood Avenue and demonstrated your new transistor radio, this tiny pastel blue box of plastic from the future that sat on your windowsill in your bedroom. It was the first tubeless broadcasting device I had ever experienced. And best part, it ran on batteries. You skimmed through the dials, playing a couple of Beatles songs, some news reports, and a classic symphony or two for good measure. I felt the thrill of Tomorrowland at that moment and thought, hey, you know what? This guy is really cool. A number of years later in high school, you invited me to drum for you and Buck Bucieri in the Truth and Soul Review. That was our progressive adaptation of the standard and flavorless school variety show. You probably have no idea how much that opportunity meant to me. I mean, come on. You guys were total legends on the high school music scene. It was like I would be sitting in with the East Aurora High School version of the Beatles themselves. Well, we were a total hit. That experience alone raised my confidence as a performing musician, and thanks to you, it also served to elevate my social station to, well, maybe fellow cool guy. High school ended and we both transitioned into young adulthood. You went off to college and I got on my motorcycle and went off to see the world. We both got married and we both got divorced. Soon after my marriage ended in 1980, I left on an inner journey, this time one of disillusion that lasted for nearly a year and eventually ended at your doorstep in Juneau, Alaska. I was headed to Anchorage, then on to Australia, but you suggested I alter those plans and settle down in the capital city and try and make a go of it on the final frontier. You had an empty room at your trailer and it was all mine if I wanted it. I accepted your kind invitation, which ultimately changed the trajectory of my life, particularly as an artist. Your sage advice would ultimately open doors of opportunity for me that would last to this day. The decades in Alaska played out for us with remarkable fortune. We got off to a little bit of a rough start, though, when a heat lamp, jerry-rigged by our landlord to thaw the line to our trailer, fell and broke at 3 a.m. It caught the line and the tank itself on fire. Within minutes, the fire quickly devoured the tool shed and began ripping through the single-wide matchbox of a home. The neighbor woke you, thank God, and got you out to safety, but not before you made it through the dense barrier of smoke to my room to call out the alarm. My room was located right next to the tool shed, and by then it was gone, engulfed in smoke and flames. When you made it outside, you saw that my car was gone, and you just hoped for a miracle. Such a miracle transpired 2 hours prior. Restless and unable to sleep, I had gotten dressed and driven down to a local club to get some air and maybe tire myself out. I ran into a friend, and when I returned home around sunrise, the trailer was gone, and so was everything we owned. This was a huge setback for both of us, but I have to say we were lucky to be alive. It could have easily gone the other way. The remarkable part for me was that the loss did not slow you down, Jason. That morning you were on the phone probing all your local contacts and found us a new home within a week. I want to emphasize, you found us a new home. I was humbled by your thoughtfulness. You could have more easily found a place to crash just for yourself, but you included me, and we were starting over. For years I romanticized the purchase of my first home. I imagined the style would fall somewhere between industrial loft and French country, framed in a storybook landscape, complete with a full working studio out back. Of course, no part of that plan ever included a crooked, run-down, and faceless pile of lumber on Douglas Island you were convinced was a great investment, and that we should go in on it together. Why? Because you had a plan. Prices were at rock bottom in Juneau at the time on the anticipation that the capital would be relocated north to Wasilla. Your hard bet was that the measure would be rejected and home prices would shoot higher soon after the vote. Well, I was pretty skeptical. Real estate was not my thing, but your argument was convincing enough that we signed the papers the following week. After jacking it up, installing a brand new foundation, replacing all the dated wiring and plumbing, and applying a significant share of beauty cream, our new dwelling took on a new life with a fresh look. We completed the project before the end of the summer, hung up our tool belts, and waited for the vote. In November, we won our wager by a 10,000 vote margin, and 2 weeks later we sold the property for twice the amount of our purchase. We pulled it off. My portion of the proceeds went to pay for a year in design school in Seattle, and you tucked yours away and eventually applied it to the purchase of the house on 7th Street, the place we affectionately refer to as Budzo Manor, or simply the Manor. The story of my time at the Manor deserves a tale of appreciation all its own, but in brief, by introducing me to this community of brothers and later sisters, and inviting me into an open-hearted collective of principled, kind, and entertaining pals, you helped set the metric of measure for many of my relationships going forward. Taking up residence at the Manor years later blessed me with a family that continues to reign in significance and substance throughout my life, regardless of where I set my head down on this planet. There is no other appreciation that rises above the gratitude I feel for this incredible gift of extended family that you bestowed upon me. During my tenure at the Manor, you patiently schooled me in the basics of HTML code. On an evening, we sat around the dining room table discussing the role of technology in education. That one serendipitous lesson propelled me onto the World Wide Web and held me upright on my board as I surfed this new tech wave of opportunity we called the Internet. You were confident this emerging platform would change the world as we knew it, and you were determined that I become an active practitioner throughout its development. That day, you bought me a ticket to the future, and I never looked back. At the time, my career as an Alaskan artist was firing on all cylinders, distributing my art, servicing my galleries, traveling long distances for shows. Yet I continued my investigation and experimentation with computers and technologies, especially as it related to art and creativity. What followed, based solely on your recommendation, I was hired by ASTE, the Alaska Society for Technology and Education, the very organization that awarded you a Lifetime Achievement Award. They wanted me to present a 2-day lecture and work seminar centered around digital art and music production. This was an extraordinary opportunity that honed and sharpened my public speaking and teaching skills, setting me on a path for placement as an assistant professor at the University of Alaska, again, through your highly respected recommendation. An assistant professor, Jason, me, a guy that barely graduated high school. Here I was teaching a series of digital design and fine art courses at an accredited university. Go figure. One after the other, these watershed moments in my life offer the undeniable evidence of what one thoughtful, considerate, and generous soul such as yourself, Jason, can provide to advance the opportunities in another person's life. Every one of your selfless acts of big-hearted inclusion hit the mark for your pal here and reveal the signature of kindness that's simply built into your character. My sincere intention is to pass your model forward by being a resource for others when presented with the opportunity to do so. So I know, you being the humble guy that you are, you'll pass the credit right back to me. And well, okay, truth be told, it does not escape me that I am a skilled opportunist with an odd mix of creative ability. Many of those skills have definitely fueled the upward trend in my life. But we need to be clear about the role you have played at crucial periods in my timeline. You continually show up with gestures of optimism and support time and time again, which nourished the confidence necessary for me to even launch into a 40-year career as a successful artist. And it was simple. You believed in me, often in places where I had not learned yet to do so. That level of certainty played out time and again on your watch, kindling the flame for many victories along the way. So when it came time to decide who I would ask to stand by my side in Iceland as I took Helga's hand in marriage, there was only one pal who qualified with a consistent history of support for my well-being. Hesitation only gripped me for a moment, and only in consideration that you had just recently recovered from a double lung transplant. I was sensible enough to understand what that might mean for your health, traveling the 7,000 kilometers to my current home, floating out in the middle of the North Atlantic. But I did ask, if only so you would know you were my primary choice. But without skipping a beat, you replied, of course, I would be honored. So let's fast forward to today. It's your 68th birthday, Jason. This is the day we celebrate your life. And though our birthdays are supposed to be the best day of the year for us, I am aware that each year has been marked with additional challenges for you, and this one is no different. I wish that I had some superpower or magical spell that could manifest the gift of normal life for you again. But unfortunately, I don't have a superpower, Jason, and I don't know any magic spells. But what I do have is a big heart and a lot of love for my friend. And what I do know is that I will do whatever is needed to make your life even a little bit easier for you and for Terry. That's a promise. You have been there for me again and again and have made a huge difference. And now, it's my turn. You know, I know it's kind of a guy thing where we find it challenging to ask for help, especially when help would really make all the difference. So if simply asking for help gets in the way of you getting what you need, then let's try and look at it from a different angle. Let's just assume I'm repaying a debt of gratitude to the folks who brought you to this world. That would be your mom and dad. Because that blessed event set into motion a chain of events that would ultimately transform and expand my overall options in life. The reality, My life would have turned out entirely different had your father not had that twinkle in his eye for your mom. I am grateful to them, and especially grateful for Terry, who has loved you so well through this period of time that has been difficult for both of you. So when it comes down to it, Jason, I believe it's fairly simple. It's remembering there's no such thing as a small act of kindness, and then remembering the people who shared some with you. With that, I want to wish you a wonderful birthday, my friend. Much love, blessing, and gratitude to you and to Terry. John.
Thank you, John. When John writes about Jason changing the trajectory of his life and believing in him, I think there's a lot of stories like that out there. It wasn't, think about this, or you might do this, or it was always you should. It was like, I don't know. But he really believed in people, and you just felt like, you didn't want to let him down, or I don't know. So thanks, John. That was great. Frank Sullivan is a dear friend and past roommate of Jason's and an honorary Budzo. They have known each other for over 20 years. Jason has been a huge mentor of Frank's as an example of how to treat people, how to live in the moment, how to think about one's impact on others, and how to love without boundaries. He is a multi-instrumentalist who sings with power and passion and writes songs that go straight to the heart. He has been nominated for many International Bluegrass Music Association awards, including Male Vocalist of the Year and Instrumental Player of the Year. Frank and his band, Dirty Kitchen, have toured around the world and racked up a steady stream of awards and nominations, including 2 Grammy nominations. So we'll hear from Frank.
Hey all, Frank Sullivan here. I wanted to send you a song that I know Jason would approve of. This is a song that speaks of taking advantage of the time you have with the ones you love, and I really wish there was more time to spend with Jason. The last time I hung out with him, he knew it was the end, and he ended up giving me a number of musical instruments, which I don't have with me today. I'm in a hotel room traveling, and I know he wouldn't have it any other way. Get out there and play and do your thing, man. Anyhow, this song is about that, taking advantage of the time you have with the people you love, because you don't know if that time is going to come again. So here's a song to help remind us of that. Love you, Jason. I'll miss you. Hello, friend. Haven't seen you in quite a while, but it sure is good to see your face. It sure is good to see your smile. This old world has found a way of twisting through my life and turning what seemed like moments into years again. The moments, days, or years you're unforgotten. Hello, friend. Hello, friend. Sit down and talk with me a while. I can see the years have slowed us down. It's good to see they haven't changed our style. Let's talk about the good times. Let's talk about all the crazy things that we did not see each other for a while. When you know how far the time is, give him an inch, he'll take a mile. And if this world finds its way of twisting through our lives and turning their moments into years again, 11 moments, days, or years, you're unforgotten. So long, friend. Yes, in this life or the next life, it warms my heart to know that you're my friend. Miss you, Jason.
Thank you, Frank. Dr. Jim Johnson is next. He arrived in Juneau on the back of the MV Matanuska in the summer of 1983 in hot pursuit of his college sweetheart, Mary. They married the next year and spawned Greta and Jacob in quick succession. Jim has had a long career in Alaska, serving in government, business, and the university. He's now working with the National Association of System Heads on higher education policy, teaching at the University of Alaska, and writing 2 books, Visions for Alaska's Future and Recreating Public University Systems, both to be published next year. He had the good fortune to work with Jason for many years.
My comments will be more prosaic than those beautiful words and sounds and stories you've already heard. But we're gathered today from near and far to remember Jason, his life. But as is the nature of human life, we're cursed and we're blessed. And I think we're cursed by our loss of such a loving and devoted husband, father, brother, friend, and teacher. Cursed by the absence of his powerful influence as a scholar going forward, with so many accolades he received over the years, including the highest recognition a faculty member can receive at the University of Alaska, a president's professor. Cursed by the silence of his guitar, his piano, his laugh, his insights. Cursed by knowing the suffering he went through. Cursed by wondering whether I, did all we could to support him. And cursed by the knowledge that life for all of us ends. But at the same time, thank God we're blessed by having lived with Jason, by having learned from Jason. My daughter Greta learned about digital storytelling from Jason. She's now a podcaster, reading books and interviewing authors in Chicago. Our son Jacob was inspired at 5 with a guitar he got from Jason and a cowboy vest and cowboy boots and a cowboy hat. And he sat in a tree on our house in 6th Street and played 2 very famous songs. Brett knows those songs. One was called Fire Truck, and the other was called Airplane. And tourists who would walk up the stairs there, the Seward Street stairs to go up to the Wickersham house, would notice this little 5-year-old boy up there singing away, inspired by Jason. We're blessed to having danced at his music, blessed by the courage as he struggled with his health, blessed by loving him and being loved by him. Blessed by the opportunity now to gain insight into the meaning of our lives as we reflect on our life with him, to reflect on our purpose in life, how we contribute to the lives of others, how we serve, how we celebrate our victories, how we recover from our failures, how we grieve loss, how we model grace and humility, how we love, how we are loved, how we appreciate the gifts of life, and how we bring joy to others and to ourselves. And though he suffered like few do, Jason was driven by his pursuit of a meaningful life, a life of impact, revealing the nexus of technology and education, writing prolifically, and yet doing even more, educating the people who would teach our young. Creating beautiful music, dedicating himself to his many friends, and devoting himself to his family, especially to you, and having fun. So long ago, when Mary and I were still raising our kids, a wise friend suggested that people only need to get two things right in their lives. And I said, come on, you got to get lots of things right in your lives. No, Jim, you just need to get two things right in your life. Your kids, their job, their haircut, their tattoos, details. Trivial details, just two things. Simple and yet really, really hard. Their higher purpose and their life partner. Clearly, Jason got both right, leaving us, cursed and blessed as we are, to follow his example in a calm, and peaceful, and warm, and loving, and joyful light. Love you, Jason.
You know, on a website called Afterwards, the first line was, let's put the word fun back in funeral, and we're not doing that. So if anybody has any jokes, funny stories, it's certainly welcome here. So thanks, Jim. Our next speaker is Dr. Mary Wegner, instructor, advisor, co-teacher, colleague, consultant, dissertation committee member, professor emeritus, international thought leader, groundbreaker, inspirational motivator, role model, door opener, mentor, and most importantly, beloved friend are a few of the ways that Mary has described Jason since they met in January of 1990, when she literally fell into his social impacts of technology class, and her life was forever changed.
It's wonderful to see you all here, both in the room and online. There's about 50 people in the Zoom right now, and they've been here for the whole time, joining us virtually. So I wanted to share that I've been monitoring the chat and seeing the engagement, and it's wonderful to have so many people. Jason played many roles in my life, and throughout the 30-plus years, I was honored to be able to call him mentor and friend. I saw firsthand how Jason lived, what mattered in life, and these are not any new themes that we haven't heard already today. He worked hard to make a difference in the world. He always treated others with dignity, kindness, and respect. And he made sure to make time to play with family and friends. Jason was gifted in many ways. I remember one time in 1997, back when people flew less, and you always saw people that you knew at the gate at SeaTac. Jason and I found ourselves on the same plane from Seattle to Juneau. The plane wasn't too full, so we ended up sitting next to each other. As the flight took off, Jason pulled out his reading material, a book of music by, I'm sure, Beethoven, knowing his admiration for Beethoven, but it might have been Mozart. Jason started reading the sheet music like a book. I commented that I thought he didn't know how to read music, and he replied that he didn't. He loved to look at the notes and follow the melody. That was classic Jason. His mind never stopped wanting to learn, experience, and contribute. Never one to waste time by vegging out. Jason always had his laptop when he had a spare moment, updating his website, fine-tuning presentations, or interacting and inspiring students. He worked hard and wanted to leave a legacy that made a difference in the world. There is a reason he is known as an international thought leader and why he touched so many people's lives in a profound and meaningful way. Many of us know how gifted Jason was in motivating others to be their best selves, as we've heard some stories today. He lived free of judgment and instead focused on the heart of a person and elevated them. Jason used to call me Dr. Wegner long before I ever seriously thought about earning a doctorate. He saw in me gifts that I wasn't fully recognizing in myself and wanted to inspire me to challenge myself to get every tool I would need to be able to contribute in the field of education. He served on my doctoral dissertation committee. And I can honestly say that without Jason's encouragement and support, I'm not sure that I would have ever completed my dissertation. And as we all know, I am not alone in experiencing how wonderful it was to be seen and accepted by Jason for who I am, with all of my gifts and all of my goals. He exemplified the best in humanity and inspired me to be better every day by truly listening to the heart of others. Jason worked hard and played hard. Long before he was 50, he told me that he didn't expect to live past 50, as his father died early. After he turned 50, he said that every day is a blessing. Jason had the soul of a blues musician and introduced me to some great artists, such as Robin Ford, that you will hear at the end of the ceremony. Spending time with his friends, whether playing music, talking about music, or just engaged in meaningful discourse, was important to Jason. So important, as a matter of fact, that he wanted to make sure we put the fun back in funeral. It was probably 25 years ago that Jason asked me to make sure that specific music was played at his memorial service. Over the years, he updated the list and thought a lot about how to make a difference in our lives, even after he was no longer with us. Jason loved and cherished spending time with his family and his friends. And I wasn't the only colleague who became a trusted friend. It was hard to limit the number of stories I wanted to share today, as the moments are innumerable and memorable. Thank you, Jason, for adding such value to my life over the past 30 years and into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Next is Rick Ohler. He is Jason's older and, however slightly, taller brother. Rick broke his mom and dad into parenthood so that when Jason appeared, they had ceased trying to be strict disciplinarians and said, in effect, oh, what the hell, let him do whatever he wants. And Jason did whatever he wanted, and what he wanted was to be amazing. Rick likes to think that by tiring out their parents, he played a small role in Jason's success.
So, December of 1952, this little kid shows up at the house on Oakwood Avenue, knocks me right off of the pedestal. Suddenly I got competition, you know, and Mom says that there was a brief period where we had a little struggle, a little jealousy thing and stuff. You know, but after that, the amazing thing is, I don't think I ever had a harsh word with my brother Jason or my brother Michael. It's an amazing thing. Families aren't supposed to be like that. I hear people talk about families. Well, I got trouble with this. I got trouble with that. I'm going, we don't got no trouble. We just love each other, you know. And there was never even a jealousy thing. Here's a quick story. When the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan in 1964, all of a sudden we were all going to be rock and roll musicians. You know, I mean, everybody, probably 20 million kids, decided on that day that, oh no, we're going to be rock and roll musicians, and we're going to make it big. Jason, I was in a band. Jason was in a band. He was in a wonderful band called the Nefarious Prodigies. He played drums. I was in a really lousy band called the Fanatics. I played guitar not so well, and Jason, you know, he would listen, and I would practice, and we would play Twist and Shout, and that was about as far as we got. It had 3 chords, and if you struggled, you could get all 3 chords in the right order. And one day, Jason comes into my room, and he says, "Hey, can I, you know, just noodle around on your guitar?" I said, "Yeah, sure, go ahead." I was studying or something, and within 15 minutes, the guitar had revealed all its secrets to Jason. Secrets that would never reveal themselves to me. And I said to Jason, I said, "It's yours. Take the guitar." And you could see what he was able to do with music. You know, and then he left. You know, it's funny, the 3 of us. You know, Jason ended up living 3,800 miles from our home on Oakwood Avenue in East Aurora. And I now live about 3,800 feet from that house on Oakwood Avenue in East Aurora. He's global. I'm local. Michael is helpful. But what we've done, is, all of us, is it came down to stories. You know, Jason is the global digital storyteller. I work for the local newspaper, Circulation 4,000. You know, Jason talks to people 7 billion, you know. Mike is always hearing stories of people that he goes on to help. And somehow, we have to credit our parents, who both died way too young, but they had this thing that they did, and I don't know if they tried or even knew, but we were able to have this wonderful, wonderful brotherhood. And, you know, this has been a tricky time for me. A lot to do and a lot to, you know, to think about, and it allows you to move forward. But every now and again it washes over you. It goes, Jesus Christ, my brother is dead. And, you know, it's just like, wow. It just knocks you for a loop sometimes. But, you know, I have this wonderful thing, this thing that we do. It's about storytelling. And it's so funny that as we evolved, you know, 3,800 miles away from each other, and 350 miles away where Mike is relative to me, we kind of did the same thing, because we knew, Jason knew, and I know, and Mike knows, that in the end, it is our stories that sustain us. And so I go forward from this awful thing that happened a couple months ago, and I know that I have those stories, and that they will live on. And Jason was such a genius at being able to make sure that they will go on, and that others know how to make them go on. So I'm blessed. I'm glad I got my mic here, and I've got the stories of my brother. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rick. I know it was a long trip, but hearing you is like kind of seeing Jason a little bit. It's kind of fun. So thanks for that. Next is another Ohler brother. Say Ohler brother 3 times fast. Dr. Mike Ohler has lived just outside of Burlington, Vermont for just over 25 years, 15 of those with his wife Megan and 12 with their son Brenton, who is on the receiving end of many of Jason's silly jokes. Michael has been a social worker on various levels and a teacher, professor to college students for most of the 25 years. Some of Michael's best classes were the ones where Jason was his guest speaker. It did not matter the class or the topic. Jason always mesmerized them. Michael pursued and obtained a doctorate degree at the urging of Jason, saying to Michael when he expressed concerns about past educational and life experience failures, what was then is not now. And I think that's a recurring theme here. I think there are a lot of people that would not have gone back to higher ed if it wasn't for Jason just saying, you should, just do it. Thank you.
Well, thanks for that intro. And one part, as Scott and I emailed a little bit back and forth, he goes, I'd like to know a little bit more about those jokes. So in light of that, I called my son Brenton this morning and I said, what was your favorite one? And what was your favorite Uncle Jason joke? Again, there were many. So he said to me, emphatically, what do ducks always have for lunch? Soup and quackers. So we could probably just start shouting them out, but we got other things to do here. So, one other just kind of thing off the cuff before I get onto these prescribed remarks, which I did so I wouldn't go wander off, which I seem to be doing just for a second here. We went out to Christy's house yesterday to help Terry make up some beds, which I'm really awful at. I don't know why she trusted me with that, but I didn't want to do it without a little background music because I thought maybe I'd do it worse if I did that, and so I just typed in free music, and because I didn't want to pay for anything, of course, on my phone, and then the first song that came up, and this is completely random. I didn't choose a topic or a genre of music. Buffalo Springfield, For What It's Worth. Wow. So I believe one of his favorite songs. But okay. Now to the prescribed stuff. Jason and I lived under the same roof until I was 13, and then again briefly when he was in between things a few years later. In retrospect, peering back through my high school-aged eyes, it was never an option that he would stay in the wonderful village of East Aurora where we grew up and Rick still calls home. It was just a matter of when and where he would go. And while it was vital to Jason's well-being that he venture out on his own when he did, I don't think he was aware that ultimately he could not take the emotional, ongoing journey alone. My sense is he did not truly begin to flourish until he laid down his roots in Juneau, and did not truly hit his stride until he joined forces with the Budzos, and then others, many others, and eventually Terry. You see, while he never forgot us, the family he grew up with, and let us know often in all sorts of ways that he loved us, you, all of you who are here, all of here, virtually and here, are his family too. My real purpose for speaking today was merely to say thank you for taking such good care of him. You all helped him see the goodness he innately possessed and to achieve the amazingness that ultimately came to define him once he arrived here.
I want to riff just a little bit on once he arrived here. In a lot of ways, I think Jason was like a guest on Earth, that he was like a visitor. And he had problems with some earthly things, like windshield wipers and you know, stuff like that. Put gas in the car, and like he didn't like to do laundry, so he took his laundry to a laundromat locally and stuff like that. And for a while, he had the office next to me at the Bill Ray Center. And it was like a mad scientist's dream room. So he had like a sealskin drum for a story that he was doing. He had a green screen, he had a keyboard, he had a stack of books, and they were things like stories from India, you know, and that's where he made music, he taught, it was just, you never knew what was going on over there. And so I'm gonna introduce Terry, which is like impossible, but Jason referred to her as Saint Terry. And as soon as she was on the scene, she was like his tether to the planet. You know what I mean? She helped him like make sure that he had food and all those things, because he was living in a different space. He wasn't, you know, he was visiting us. So Saint Terry, they say that opposites attract, and Terry says that was true in her and Jason's relationship. He was the big picture thinker. She thought in minute details. He had a dynamic personality, and she was content being behind the scenes. He had all the education and experience that sent them working around the world, and she had all the practical experience to help him stay organized and make it happen logistically. He was the funny one, she was the practical one. They made a great team, and neither of them could have done what they did without the other. So because of the fun side of Jason, and with the influence of reading Dr. Seuss books to her grandkids, Terry, with Mary Wegner's assistance, wrote this poem for his introduction to the teachers at the Sitka School District opening kickoff to the school year in 2013.
Should be Jason in the spotlight, not me. He is, but I mean at this moment. Okay, amazing Dr. O. The crazy Dr. O, through the rain, sleet, and snow, to the students he will go. That magnificent Dr. O. The talented Dr. O, a master of multimedia, the techno encyclopedia. He's in the know, to the schools he will go. That magnificent Dr. O. The mature Dr. O, old hand at broadband throughout the land, to the students he will go. That magnificent Dr. O. The smart guy, Dr. O, knowledgeable and schooled, oh, to the schools he will go. That magnificent Dr. O. The creative Dr. O, he's got AR mojo. Trust him high, trust him low, to the students he will go. That magnificent Dr. O. The musical Dr. O, to the piano and guitar he will go. To write the song with the tempo, to take him to the schools, oh, that magnificent Dr. O. The sought-after Dr. O, around the world he will go. To take him to the students, oh, that magnificent Dr. O. The inspirational Dr. O, the thoughts he will bring us to and fro. For EdTech to his website we go. Oh, that magnificent Dr. O. I really want to thank everybody for joining us today here, virtually. It means a lot. And I want to say something about the beautiful tapestry you see in front of us. A special friend of Jason's and mine, Candy Kuhn, who's married to Craig Harris, who we saw his music. Jason met them when he was in college in Toronto. She's a beautiful artist, and she dyed the fabric especially for this event. I asked her to use some bright colors like the polo shirts that Jason typically wore, and she shared that it makes her think that Jason's floating in the nebulas, watching over us. So it's very special. Thank you, Candy. Can't see the words on the page. in his last days, in a way, Jason was able to write his own story. And I'd like to share that with you. A couple days before he passed, he was hospitalized. And after tests and whatnot, they determined that he had too much carbon dioxide in his body. His system was being poisoned by that because his lungs were too weak to process out the carbon dioxide. So basically, they gave him the choices. You can go on a heavy-duty CPAP around the clock, or you can be on a ventilator. And basically, he said, I'm not going to do that. But he did try. It only took about half a day, though. And he said, this isn't going to be how I'm going to live. I'm going to choose to go on hospice. But he said, I'm going to go through the night and see what happens, and we'll talk about it more tomorrow. So Sunday morning, he went in the hospital Saturday afternoon. Sunday morning, he called me, and he said, how soon can you come? I'm ready for hospice. So I went down and stayed with him for the day. They had the CPAP machine on, and he could barely talk. You could barely understand him if he did, because it was like just huge sucking on his face. But it was taking out some of the CO2 and keeping him there a little bit longer. So Sunday went on, and he mostly slept all day, and he was in ICU. And the shift change comes on at 7, and they have to do an assessment when they change from nurse to nurse. So the nurse was there, we were trying to rouse him, and we were shaking him and calling his name, and his eye might flutter open slightly. That happened a while. Then after a bit, he started to open his eyes, but then he would close them. It took us like 10 minutes to get him fully awake. And the nurse did her assessment. He answered what his name was, where he was, who the president is, what year it was, all those things, pushed on his hands and feet and said, okay, great. And then the nurse left, and he said, I want to tell you something. I want you to share this. He said, I died, and I came back. And I foolishly at the time said, I'm standing here looking at the monitor. I'm facing it the whole time. You didn't beep once. So I said, okay, what? I said, did you see your mom and dad? And he said, no. But then he said, I just want you to know, it's what I feel like happened. I said, okay, great, I'm glad. And he said, I feel joyful. I'm joyful. I want you to tell everybody that because it's okay for me to let go. So he said, it was definitely time for hospice. We had this little discussion because the transplant team had come in the morning and did their rounds, and they had said on Monday morning they were going to meet, and the whole team, all the doctors would meet and make a decision for their patients on treatment. And I just said, I'm fine with that decision. I just want you to think about this before I come back tomorrow morning and say, if the team comes in and says, well, we might have a chance of doing this and this and this. And he said, no, I have my assurance. I did whatever I did, died and came back, or had my moment, and I'm ready for this. So Monday they did quick arrangements at the hospital. It was quick. They got the hospice team and the discharge team, and it took all day for us to get the house ready and get the equipment there. But on the way home, Bethany came down and helped me get him home. And there was a beautiful Arizona sunset, one of his favorite things about Arizona. And he remarked how wonderful it was to see that on the way home. And we got home, and my boys were there, carried him in the house, got him all set up. The hospice nurse came, and I had to sit and talk to her. So the kids, Bethany was there too. They all chatted with him. I could hear him laughing off and on and all this stuff. It was wonderful. And then the hospice nurse did her assessment of Jason, and he kept sticking on, I don't want to be in this hospital bed in the living room. I want to be in the bedroom in our bed. And the hospital nurse was like, Terry can't lift you, you're dead weight, it's not gonna be safe, blah, blah, blah. He just kept pushing, and that's why I just finally said, honey, fine. I'm gonna put a Chucks under you, and I'm going for Depends first thing in the morning, because I can't pick you up. Anyways, so the boys got him in the room for me, and they said goodbye. And Jason had a lovely, lovely conversation before he went to sleep. And he never woke up the next morning. He passed in his sleep. And I lost my notes, so give me a second. Okay, I'm just at the end of the page. So when I realized that he had passed, I called Bethany. She came over and helped me, and we, of course, talked and hugged him and cried and did all our things. And then we called the family and told them everything, called hospice. But later in the morning, my lovely daughter-in-law, Jess, was texting with Bethany and said, "You guys have to eat. What can I do? Can I bring you food? What do you want to do?" And I told Bethany, "Text Jess and tell her I'll let her know in a while. Let me think about it." It took me 20 minutes, and I'm like thinking about Jason. I'm like, "Y'all come down for dinner." He loved sitting in the bedroom and watching and listening to our family, the grandkids and all the kids, and just having real life and listening to us pick on each other and joke and laugh and cry and be ourselves. And I thought, that's what we need to do. Everybody needs to come over and celebrate Jason. The sweet thing about it was, well, Clay was already on a plane, because when he found out that hospice was the thing, he got on a plane. And so he arrived just about the same time as some of the family members. And there was a beautiful rainbow in the sky as everybody was getting to the house. About an hour and a half later, I don't remember who saw it, but somebody went out and there was a double rainbow in the sky. And I just feel like that was Jason visiting and saying, "It's okay. It's okay. It's all good." So we had a lovely time as a family. We laughed, we cried plenty, we toasted Jason, and we had all the ruckus and craziness that we always did that he loved to hear. But I started with saying, in his last days, in a way, Jason was able to write his own story. And I feel like he wrote the ending to his extraordinary life. In a sense, he didn't know for sure that he did, but he got all of his wishes. The sun set, he was at home, he was in our bed. He always told me for years, "I hope I die in my sleep." And the rainbows gave us the message that all was okay. So thank you for joining. And I send love and hugs to everybody here and online from both of us.
I think before we do anything, we need to stand up and just do this. Okay. So we now will have an open floor for anyone in the room. If you'd like to join us and say something.
Hello, I'm Wilder Dillingham, the oldest son of Brett Dillingham, and I would just like to say some things about Jason that is true for most of people here. Jason was Superman. He may not have been able to fly or shoot lasers out of his eyes, but he had X-ray vision. He could see through each and every one of us. He could see into us and our potential and our paths in life. And after he found his path somewhere earlier in life, and he shot towards the horizon, he reached out with his invisible hands, and he grabbed each and every one of us and started pulling us along. As I grew up in Budzo Manor, I interacted with Jason almost every day. I would go upstairs and I would talk with him and I would do things with him. And he had a major impact in shaping my worldviews and helping me find my own path. I remember the James Brown toy that I had upstairs, and it would sing, and it gave me a love for music that I still have to this day. And I would just like to say, that I loved Jason. Jason was an amazing person, and he had a major impact shaping who I am now.
I'm Stuart Cohen, an old friend of Jason's. And Jason and Terry have in their 7th Street house a very large table, very heavy table. And this table could be expanded out with I don't know how many leaves, but it's not quite the size of Vladimir Putin's table, but it felt like that. And I can't count how many times I was a guest at their house, whether for Thanksgiving or just for a dinner. And there was always sort of the usual suspects of Budzo Manor that would be there, would come wandering in and out, and their children, and then just various people that Jason had brought in and that we would meet. And I always knew that I was going to see somebody there that I was cared for very much, but that I didn't see very often. And some of the most vivid memories are the night that we first met Helga, John Farringer's wife, who was this crazy Viking lady, and it seemed like she had silver boots on or spike heels, and all the women wanted to try the spike heels on. And John told his version of how they met, and then she told her version of how they met. And another Thanksgiving where I was charged with cooking the turkey, and the best part of it was I could complain intermittently for about an hour and a half that my wife had gotten this heritage turkey that was organic that cost $100, and people listened to me. And so that table was always sort of defined for me what home is and what this community is. Jason was a incredibly buoyant person. I never heard him speak with resentment or rancor towards anyone, no matter what no matter what their relationship had been. Sometimes he just voiced a sort of perplexity that people would not behave like with the same sense of openness or joy that he had. He took on any task, whether it was writing a symphony, writing an academic book. He wrote many novels. He played the guitar really well. And he took on each of these tasks fearlessly without any expectation of rewards that he would get from them, other than it would be cool or it would be interesting. He also, I remember one time, it was probably three years ago at Brett's 60th wedding, not wedding, 60th birthday party. And I was in the other room. People were there's a band, and I was in the other room, and I was talking to somebody inside while the band was playing out on the porch. And then I heard this guitar playing, and it was like, I was conversing, but it was like, wow, that's really good. They must have put on, I assume they had put on some musical group like Santana or somebody like that from sort of the big world. And it was just kind of distracting because this guitar player was really wailing. And then I went out there, and it was Jason. And I didn't know that he could play that well. And I also didn't know that it had been several years, I think, since he had even picked up a guitar. And so that memory really stays with me. And I also, I had, of course, innumerable conversations with Jason, and they were always interesting, always thought-provoking. But one thing about Jason that I remember the most is that you would be talking about something, and maybe it was something that was unhappy, or maybe it was just something that was like something in society that you're like kind of like this about, or just kind of something about human nature, and he would end the conversation, or that part of the conversation, with this sort of short, piercing laugh. And I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but just like a ha, and it was like, that sort of summed everything up and made everything sort of a funny part of life, and made it, more comprehensible, and you could then sort of move on. So I hope I will keep hearing that laugh going forward. So that's all I would say.
For our virtual guests, there will be a slide, and it will have a QR code on it. And from that, you'll be able to go to a Zoom setup, and you can record a message for Jason's family. So that, for everybody that's out there, if you'd like to send a message, yes, this is it, magically. Okay. So I guess we're at the end of this space and time, and just want to thank everybody for being here. I don't know about the rest of you, but I really needed this. It was a really good time with all of you. So thank you so much, and let's keep listening. There's wireless stuff happening. He's still out there. So thank you so much.